Hi, Year 10. So we're going to finish poetry today by doing what I think is the last poem in your anthology. I want you to start by looking at this picture. It's beautiful because you can see water falling down and rocks and some moss. It's a very natural image. So I want you to reflect on the poems we've looked at in love and relationships. In what other poems have you seen natural imagery? For each poem you name, you get 1 point. If you're then able to give a quote for that poem that demonstrates the natural imagery, you'll get an additional 2 points. And if for those quotes you can give layers of analysis, e.g. this word suggests, you'll get an additional 3 points. So pause the video and give yourself 8 minutes to do that. Great, so a few example answers. In Love's Philosophy, which we did recently, you saw the quote, mingle with the river. Think about what you can remember about that word mingle and what that suggested. It's definitely the idea of two things coming together and being quite physical, and we know that poem is about desire. In Neutral Tones, you remember they stood by a pond, a few leaves lay on the starving sod. And that was actually quite a depressing image where the relationship was struggling. And likewise in Winter Swans, the waterlogged earth gulping for breath at our feet. Again, natural imagery was used there to show how their relationship was struggling. If you think back to the last poem we did, Sonnet 29, I hope you could think of some positive images of how natural imagery was used. Okay, so we're going to look at a poem today called Letters from Yorkshire, and I think this poem is really quite relevant for the times we're in now. It's about two people that live in different parts of the country writing to each other, and it has reference to nature, which I hope we're all appreciating during this lockdown, but also to the news and the role that that plays and how that connects people even though they're physically apart. So let's look at this stanza by stanza. The first one, in February, digging his garden, planting potatoes, he saw the first lapwings return and came indoors to write to me, his knuckles singing. Here we can see that the character she's describing loves being outdoors in nature. He's able to grow things. Hopefully you notice that this is alliteration, the idea that the same thing is happening twice, and maybe that's like in his garden, there's more than one potato that's growing. He can see the first lapwings return. And so this is a man that's really connected to the outside world. And he comes indoors to write to her, his knuckles singing. As they reddened in the warmth, it's not romance, simply how things are. You out there in the cold, seeing the seasons. Here in that line, it's not romance. That could suggest that maybe the relationship between these two people is not a romantic one. Or it might suggest that it's possible that she's it sounds like she's romanticizing his life of being outside, and maybe it's quite hard work. And so she's acknowledging there, I'm not saying what you do is romance, it's just how things are. Your life is very much based outside. And you see a picture of a lapwing there. Turning me with my heart full of headlines, feeding words onto a blank screen. Is your life more real because you dig and sow? We can see that this stanza ends with a rhetorical question. And there seems to be a real contrast between her life and his life. She works as a journalist and is trying to put words into a computer and think of headlines. And he has a completely different life where he's using his hands to grow things outside. I wonder if you could spot any sort of potential negative connotations of the work that she's doing. She's feeding words and the screen is blank, suggests that what she's doing is quite difficult or she's struggling with it. You wouldn't say so, breaking ice on a water butt, clearing a path through snow. Still it's you who sends me word of that other world, pouring air and light into an envelope, so that at night, watching the same news in different houses, our souls tap out messages across the icy miles. I'm going to give you 10 seconds here and I want you to find the metaphor in this stanza. So the metaphor we have here is pouring air and light into an envelope. That's a powerful metaphor because air and light are some of the key elements that we need to survive, and that's how she feels when she's opening these envelopes from him, that he is giving her this new light and this ability to kind of breathe. And I think the ending of the poem is quite beautiful and, like I said before, quite relevant now. At night, even though in the day they have such different jobs, they sit miles away watching the same news in different houses, as I'm sure we all do now. So there's something that is bringing them together. And then there's this really, really beautiful final line which says, "Our souls tap out messages across the icy miles." So a key theme of this poem is really staying in touch with people that you love. So key themes, I would say communication is a key theme in the poem. We have reference to letters, write to me, singing, feeding words onto a blank screen, sends me word, envelope. And these references in the poem really stress how important it is for two people, although physically apart, to stay in contact. The next one is seasons and nature. We had reference to those first lapwings, a special sight to see the birds coming, the breaking ice, the icy miles. And we can see that it's clearly February and it's icy and it's cold, but the appearance of the lapwing shows us that the seasons are going to change. And her focus on his life outside suggests that it seems quite appealing to her, even though that's simply how things are. The poem also contrasts two different kinds of news. You've got the daily news of our lives, our personal news, what's happening with us, and then you've obviously got the formal televised or printed news. What is interesting about this poem, although it's not my favourite poem to use in an essay, is that it's really open to interpretation. We don't know who she is writing to. It's not clear if it's a friend or a family member, and you could probably pick out different parts and argue for any of those. So that makes this poem quite interesting. What you can see in terms of structure is that the poem has been structured into 5 3-line stanzas. There is enjambment between some lines and between some of the stanzas, which might suggest that there is this flowing, ongoing communication between them. And you'll also notice that the poet, Dooley, seems to use quite everyday language as if she's speaking, and the rhetorical question kind of really reinforces that. Okay, so in terms of context, the author lived in Yorkshire for a few years before moving to London. Yorkshire's further north, and she was asked about who the person is that she's writing to in Letters from Yorkshire, and her response was that she's left the poem deliberately ambiguous. Ambiguous means not clear. As a reader, we don't know if she's talking to a friend or a relative. So your final task today, I'd like you to write a letter from Dagenham. So you're going to write a poem, but in the style of this poem. I want you to think about how important it has been to stay in touch with people that may even live just a few roads down from you, but that you can't physically see right now. And just like Dooley's, it must include a description of someone who you are in touch with, a reference to nature. So what have you noticed since lockdown? So I've definitely spent time looking at the birds and at my brother's house, the fish in the pond. What have you noticed since the lockdown? And finally, in your ending, I'd like you to reference the news. And although we're physically apart, how we're probably all tuning in at some point to listen to that. Once you finish the classwork for today, please go to Show My Homework. On there, you'll find the homework, which is a quiz asking you questions about both poems. That's what you need to submit to me this week. Take care, stay safe, bye.